Oh my god. My goddamn computer won't stay asleep. You can hear the fan, can't you? It's so loud. It is extraordinarily loud. Today, I'm giving you my very late February wrap-up. All the books that I read in the month of February for a Blackathon. So this month I read the total of... I should have thought that beforehand. So this month I read 9 books. I don't know if that's more or less than I was originally intending, but all in all it felt like a really good reading month. And I feel as though like ever since, maybe it was January, like in January it was a bit of a slump, I didn't want to read as much. Then I got into February and something happened. I think part of it was my participation in Blackathon. I felt very compelled to just read more. Part of it was like I wanted to fit more into that one vlog, and I was so glad for that motivation. But then that triggered something inside of me where I was more interested in reading than I was doing other things. And that's a fleeting thing where my interests go all over the place sometimes. And when I started my channel, I was reading so much. Not that it makes me a better reader, it's just I like having more to talk to you about. I like reading more books. It's more fun. I have more books to think about in my mind. But, you know, my interests, they grow and they wane. And I'm in a certain point where I'm actually really liking reading a lot, and I feel compelled to read a lot of the time. And now spring is starting around, and now I can bike more, which means more reading. So I'm feeling good about reading in general this year, and I think it started this month. So it was a great reading month overall. And even if all these weren't 5-star books, I still felt like it was a winter month. So I feel great about that. 9 books, solid reads. That's it. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Now, obviously, let's talk about the books. I talk about a lot of them, honestly, in my Blackathon week-long readathon vlog. That was a bit more wordy than I meant it to be, but that vlog is there. I talk about several of them, and I will not go very deeply in the ones that I talk deeply about in that vlog. I highly recommend you watch it. I had fun making it, and I loved a lot of things to say about the books. But I've organized them here instead by, first, the ones I haven't talked about to the ones I did talk about. Okay, first things first, the first book I read was Showdown. Come on, books, don't you fucking fall. I see you. The way the world is out to get me sometimes. Showdown by Will Haygood, author of The Butler. This is, I want to say a memoir of Thurgood Marshall, but it's not. It is about his nomination to the Supreme Court, and I'm realizing now that I have not thought about this book in over a month. So my mind is a bit, not exactly blank, but my specific thoughts may be a little generic here. I liked the book overall. It was a very compelling read, very interesting. It is the story of his nomination and eventual hearing and placement on the Supreme Court. I personally would have valued hearing his time on the court more and the things he did. But as it stands, there's actually a book out there already as a Pulitzer Prize winner. I'm going to try and find it, put it up here for you. And I definitely want to read it now. This, is, as it was good. I think I give it 4 stars. It was a solid read that was really interesting. I think really highlighted the racism that existed not that long ago in America, and probably still today. I mean, as we see the first black woman Supreme Court justice being nominated, and we see people like Ted Cruz already finding excuses to question whether her being a black woman is somehow a terrible thing to acknowledge when nominating her. I go on my tangent here, as if there aren't a huge number of qualified black women who would be just as good as any other Supreme Court justice and also happen to be a black woman. You gotta follow the company line when it comes to the rhetoric. The point is that this really, I think, highlights that, and it was a really good book to read in that moment because it was right around the time that the Supreme Court justice being nominated, whose name I forget, I will put her up here, was being announced. So it really fit very well in that conversation. And I think it reflected very strongly in what was going on. And I did not realize at the time, but Thurgood Marshall was replaced by Clarence Thomas, which was such a disappointment to hear about, because it's like learning and seeing Ruth Bader Ginsburg being replaced by the likes of Amy Barrett. The exact opposite, who will almost certainly do what they can to fight against everything that person originally stood for, which is disappointing. But the entire process as a whole was really interesting. I wish I could remember more details. Unfortunately, I can't. I would have liked it to be, again, more than just that period, but it was still interesting. It's kind of a long book for such a little bit of time. I feel like a lot of it is a precursor, a lot of its context around it. I would have liked more, I guess. I should have written a review for this. I would have remembered more. But I remember it felt a little bit lacking when it came to content, because trying to talk about the nomination process, there's only so much to tell. It's still a solid book that I honestly got me really interested into reading more. What more could you want from a book than a book that makes you want to read again or more? Next up is a YA book that I read, full disclosure, by Cameron Garrett. I keep reading that wrong. This is a story about a high school girl who has HIV and is into a guy. I'm pretty sure I wrote a review about this on Goodreads, and I hate the fact that I had such strong feelings and now my thoughts have largely again sort of dampened a bit. Overall, I like this. I want to say it was between 3.5 and 4 stars. It has a very YA tone, which is something I'm not a big fan of. But what can you expect? It is a YA book written by a young adult woman. Honestly, it was part of why I picked it up. I was like, good for her for writing such a powerful book so early. And I thought that it was a great book, had a really good conversation about what it was like to live with HIV, being born with HIV, and the type of prejudices that exist around that. I have got to look this up. I swear I have more comments. Oh, I gave it 4 stars, not 3.5. It's a well-written book that realistically and skillfully explores a number of different complicated themes. The writing has YA tone, but it's the perfect example of how novels can be targeted to a younger audience without sacrificing quality over storytelling. Yes, I didn't love the writing style as it pertains to a young adult style, but it wasn't a book that failed to cover its topic in a way that I felt was very, very effective. Speaking as someone who is seeing the story of a young black girl with HIV through a window, obviously there's a lot about this that is not my perspective. With that in mind though, I thought it was very effective, very powerful. Yes, so I'm glad I wrote that down. I'm just going to check and see if there are any general thoughts about Showdown that I forgot. See, when I feel really strong about a book, usually I feel compelled to write something down. I didn't write anything down, did I? No, well, 4 stars. It is what it is. Next up is The Wicker King, a book that I alluded to a bit in my vlog, but didn't really discuss very heavily. Didn't write notes with this, but I don't think I needed to. So The Wicker King is a YA book about these 2 young boys, teenage boys, who were best friends, always have been. And one of them begins to have these visions of a world beneath our own. Think of it like a different dimension. Like in The Magicians, the TV show, the fairies exist in a world, in a range that we can't see. It's like that. He's seeing things like that. And it's about his friend's relationship to him and how he tries to trust in his friend's experience, trying to navigate that. And in doing so, the author is exploring major mental health conversations here. I love a good fantasy story, a mythological fantasy fairy tale type story with a psychological underpinning. Whether or not what he's seeing is real is immaterial in a lot of ways to that fundamental conversation that's being had about his mental health. And this is not the only book that explores this idea in this way. And I always think it's an immensely effective way of exploring a fantasy world and also tying it into a real world scenario. And whether or not this person is seeing something imaginary or really experiencing it, the relationship between him and his friend and the queer undertones, which I wish we had more of, is very real. And that exploration is very real, regardless of if you find out in this book that it's real or not, which I will not say if you do or not. But that exploration was really good. Honestly, I remember when I read this, I gave it 4 stars, and maybe 4.5 is a better option because I'm talking about it, and my memory is so positive. At the time, I don't want to say I was disappointed, but there was something about it that didn't quite live up to my expectations. Like the writing was phenomenal, even though it was YA. Like I thought the writing was right up my alley. Again, personal preference. And the ideas it explores was well done. Everything about it was so good. A phenomenal book. It reminded me a lot of Bridge to Terabithia, which I've only seen the movie, not read the book. But I know in there we have this dynamic between these 2 young kids. Well, I don't think they actually see a magical world, but they have this idea for them they play around with. And it felt very similar to that in a lot of ways. The way we're seeing this magical world that may or may not be real. And that feeling was very similar to what I felt in that movie. Which honestly, it was a long ago, so the fact that we were able to remind me of that was kind of impressive. So I guess a really, really good book, honestly. Next up is a 5-star book that I finally read, and that is Woman, Race, and Class. I do not think I talk about this in depth in that vlog, but I do mention the fact that I found an audiobook of this that was published in the UK. I did listen to it. It was phenomenal. I do not know why it's only available in the UK, but I was able to get it at audiobooks.com, the UK version. Could not get it on Audible UK, so fuck them. In getting it made it a lot easier for me to consume it. Again, I struggle a lot with short books. I'm reading a short book this month. It's like 170 pages and I've been reading it for weeks now. But in any case, I was so excited when I found this on audio. It was a phenomenal book that will undoubtedly need to be reread time and time again. It explores basically intersectional feminism in a lot of ways. It talks about, the title really summarizes everything it's about. Like I can get deeper into it, but really the book is what you need. This was so prescient and so powerful. The fact that it's from the 80s is just hard to believe. This has been around for so long. I waited so long to read it. I am surprised it's not already out on audio, because of the fact that it feels like such a significant piece of a nonfiction, I guess. I feel like it's only a matter of time before it gets released in the States, right? It has to be. This is the kind of book that's going to get re-released. I think it's getting, I don't know if it's getting more attention, but it definitely deserves to. And I think if they invest in, re-releasing this in new ways, you can get a bigger audience, which is definitely worth giving it to for the conversation it's having, which is still very much, again, present. Now we're getting to books that I've talked about in other ways. The last book I will be talking about, to be clear, is going to be Poppy War, in case you're wondering what that is. So that was the one I did not read for the Blackathon. Freshwater, I talk about this, I believe, in that vlog. Essentially, we have a young girl who gets possessed by a god of some sort. And that god, we're hearing the story from the god's perspective, the goddess's perspective, and what it's like to live inside this girl's mind. And again, this book, did I say 5 stars? 5 stars. It's so powerful. In the same way that Wicker King does, it explores a magical world in a way that still is fundamentally rooted in psychology. This one is especially special because it's so overtly real in that we're hearing the story from the perspective of the god herself, yet we're being forced to challenge if this narrative is still existing within the girl herself, in her mind. It is that intersection of psychology and fantasy, and the way in which this potentially really real thing is embodied in a way that is identical or very similar to certain psychological problems that exist within society. And it's that exploration, along with other explorations of, I think, gender and power that is very common with Kweki Emezi, that makes this book so amazing. I can't get away so long. It's a deep book, and it also touches on some very, I think, triggering things. So keep that in mind when you choose to read it. Now let's try and speed through this a bit more. 20 minutes, okay. The Changeling by Viktor Lavalle. I like Viktor Lavalle a lot. I loved The Ballad of Black Tom, that Lovecraftian narrative that was just so dense in Lovecraft that I loved. Since then, this is the 3rd book I read by him, including that novella. And this, again, I think there's a clear theme here that if something explores the psychology of something, I'm going to love it. Which also makes me want to reread some of my horrors up there, which I had mixed feelings about the first time I read it. But this is a story about a man. A man and a woman get married. The man is a white man, the woman is a black immigrant. And they have a child. This story is the story of that child. And the dynamic between him, his father, his mother, and the relationship he has with his wife now. And then things start to play out in very horrific ways. A big chunk of this book is about the dynamic of our main character, his wife, and them having a kid. And everything about this book, everything about their life seems okay, seems almost perfect. Yet it's a horror book. We know as a reader that something bad is going to happen. And that feeling of knowing the inevitability of the horror makes these moments of happiness and seeming perfection all the more terrifying, because you're constantly asking, when is the horror going to start? Now, I can see that being a problem for some people, because I want a horror book. But for me, it's knowing the inevitability of it that made it so unnerving. And then when things start to play out, I'm not going to spoil it, but when things start to play out, there's still this line of, what the fuck is happening? What the fuck is the changeling? And am I fucked in the mind? Like that's a kind of a question going on here with our main character. And there's a slow reveal of what's going on. And I loved this book. Oh my God, I keep saying that. This was a great month. One of those reasons that I think I'm reading so much is because I'm picking up books where I start to read them. And it's not just reading them when I have time. It's me forcing myself to make extra time to get through more of the books, because I can't wait for, just the casual reading as I've been doing for so long now, for I don't know how long. And I think that's what part of made this month so good. It's that feeling, that being driven to force myself to read more than I already was, because it's just not enough. It's never enough. Great book. What did I give this? I want to say 4.5 to 5 stars. Okay, next up. I can't say I love this one quite as much, but it was a solid book that I completely recommend. The New Moon's Arms by Neil Hopkinson. This was the story of a woman going through menopause, and her father dies, and we see her dealing with her father's death, and her relationship with her own daughter and getting older. She gave me very much Blanche Devereaux vibes, and not in a bad way, but she's struggling with getting older, with her sexuality, her independence, and yet she's also very flawed as a mother, as a person, and those imperfections are just allowed to exist. And I don't mean that in a way that they're normalized, because they're definitely not. They're very much challenged. But even as the main character doesn't necessarily reach a point that is satisfying to me as a reader, I can't help but leave it immensely satisfied to have explored this character, this very real character, in a way that just worked really well. All within a story, which I haven't even alluded to yet, that is rooted in this fantastical, magical, realist side to it. I don't want to say like something happens around that narrative that feels like less of a plot and more of a milieu for which to explore our main character. Again, what makes this book so good. I'll give this a solid 4 stars. Okay, next up we have Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi, and I talk about this in the vlog as well. Big picture, like Ring Shout, I think I overhyped myself for this. It did not live up to my expectations. It was interesting and a powerful book that basically explored this dystopia world, which is in the near future of our own world. It explores basically racial inequality in the justice system, and all of it feels very akin to our own, but it's all sort of exacerbated a little bit further with a few fantastical or speculative aspects to it. And I don't have a good reason why it didn't reach my expectations, because this is a solid 4-star book, honestly. I think it's just that I had this idea of it being more. And that feeling of more is one of those feelings that is too ambiguous to really put a name on. Like, my ability to say how much I love a book is one of those things that, like, its ability to get to reach a 5-star is so fundamental to my own inner feelings about a book that that's what's going on here. Like, it's not a bad book, it's just something about it didn't quite work for me in a way that I wish I could convey, but I can't. Finally, The Poppy War, a reread for me, and a book that I ended up liking even more the second go around. The first time I read this, I think I gave it 4 stars, because as much as I love this book, I was worried the author was gonna take us in a way that was kind of predictable, that the character would be redeemed in a way that I think was too much. I think she reached a point where our character became unredeemable, and I want to see that play out. And from everything I've heard about it, it seems as if the darkness of this first book is just the beginning of the entire trilogy. This is a story about a retelling of sort of the Opium Wars in China, with a fantastical element where basically you have these figures who, maybe I'll just say to keep it more ambiguous, that can incorporate so overtly magical aspects. There's not a question of if it's like psychological. There are some overtly fantastical aspects of the story, and the intersection of this real world historical event with the fantasy works really well. It's a very compelling book, very dark and very unsettling book that explores very real, very problematic things of this war. But I thought it made for a very effective book, but more than that, it was like a very compelling book in a way that makes it hard to put down. When a book makes you never want to put it down, that is what like an amazing book is, and that's what this is. That's what this trilogy is. I'm on book 2 now, and it's not disappointing at all. I'm absolutely adoring it. Phenomenal series. 5-star, honestly, for that reread. Okie dokie pokey. That's it. That's all 9 books. I had several of the books that I started, and that I'm currently still reading, honestly, this far into March, like the 20th or something. But you'll hear about those at the end of this month, or whenever I get that up. So thanks so much for watching this. Thanks so much for making it to the end. Let me know if you read any of these books, your thoughts on them in the comments. If you liked it, give the video a like. If you didn't like it, I suppose you can give it a dislike as I cry myself to sleep at night. But as always, thanks for watching. Have a great day. And if you make it to the end, why don't you give me... Oh, a snake. Give me a snake for freshwater. Because the goddess in that book, I think she's a snake god or something. So give me a snake if you made it to the end. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Stay safe. And I'll see you all next time. Good day.